Ladies and gentlemen, Kenzo here, and before you scroll away, let me tell you something that's going to blow your mind. Right now, as you're watching this video, there's a war happening. Not with tanks or missiles, but with something far more valuable in the 21st century. Energy. And the battlefield? It's not some distant country. It's happening in boardrooms, in secret government facilities, and deep within the data centers that power your Instagram feed, your Google searches, and your ChatGPT conversations. Just 3 weeks ago, Meta dropped a bombshell that sent shockwaves through Silicon Valley and beyond. They announced a nuclear energy deal so massive, so unprecedented, that it makes every other tech infrastructure project look like child's play. We're talking about 6.6 gigawatts of nuclear power. To put that in perspective, that's enough energy to power nearly 5 million homes, or to run an AI operation so powerful it could literally reshape civilization as we know it. But here's where it gets absolutely insane. Google and Microsoft saw this coming. They've been making their own secret moves in the nuclear space for months, signing deals worth billions that nobody's talking about. This isn't just about keeping the lights on at Facebook headquarters. This is about whoever controls the energy controls the future of artificial intelligence, and whoever controls AI will quite literally control the future of humanity. The stakes couldn't be higher, the secrets couldn't be deeper, and what I'm about to reveal to you over the next several minutes will fundamentally change how you see big tech forever. So buckle up. Hit that like button right now because this is going to be wild. And let's dive into the secret war for power that's happening right under our noses. Now, let me take you back to December 20th, 2024. That's when Meta's CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, stood in front of investors in the world and made an announcement that seemed almost casual on the surface. But insiders knew immediately that the game had just changed forever. Meta had signed agreements to procure up to 6.6 gigawatts of new nuclear energy capacity in the United States. 6.6 gigawatts. Let that number sink in for a moment. We're not talking about solar panels on a roof or a few wind turbines in a field. We're talking about nuclear power on a scale that rivals entire national grids of small countries. To give you context, the average nuclear power plant in the United States produces about 1 gigawatt of power. Meta is talking about the equivalent of 6 to 7 massive nuclear facilities dedicated entirely to feeding their AI ambitions. But here's the first secret that most people missed in the announcement. This isn't just about today's AI models. Internal documents that have leaked from Meta suggest they're preparing for AI systems that will require 10 to 20 times more computational power than anything currently available. We're talking about artificial general intelligence, about AI that can think, reason, and create at superhuman levels. And that kind of intelligence doesn't run on hope and dreams. It runs on absolutely massive amounts of electricity. The announcement sent immediate ripples through the tech world because everyone who knows anything about AI infrastructure understood what this meant. For years, the dirty little secret of artificial intelligence has been energy. Every time you ask ChatGPT a question, every time you generate an image with DALL-E, every time an AI model trains on billions of data points, it's consuming electricity at rates that would shock most people. A single training run for a large language model can use as much electricity as 100 American homes use in an entire year. Now multiply that by thousands of training runs, by millions of queries per day, by the exponential growth that everyone in the industry knows is coming, and you start to see the problem. Traditional power grids can't handle this. Renewable energy, as promising as it is, can't scale fast enough or provide the 24/7 reliability that these systems demand. Coal and natural gas are not only politically toxic, but also increasingly expensive and unreliable in terms of long-term planning. That leaves one option that the tech giants have known about for years, but have been hesitant to publicly embrace until now: nuclear energy. But Meta didn't just wake up one morning and decide to go nuclear. This has been in the works for months, possibly years, and the partners they have chosen tell us everything about how serious they are. The three main companies Meta is working with are Vistra Energy, Oklo Incorporated, and TerraPower. Now, if those names don't mean anything to you, let me explain why they should absolutely terrify Meta's competitors. Vistra Energy is one of the largest power generators in the United States, operating multiple nuclear facilities and with deep expertise in grid-scale energy production. They're the established player, the one who knows how to navigate regulatory frameworks and get things built. Oklo is where things get interesting. This is a startup backed by Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, and they specialize in small modular reactors, or SMRs. These are next-generation nuclear plants that are smaller, faster to build, and theoretically safer than traditional reactors. Oklo went public through a SPACI merger in 2024 and has been racing to get regulatory approval for their designs. The fact that Meta is partnering with them signals they're betting on this new technology being ready sooner rather than later. And then there's TerraPower, which is perhaps the most fascinating of all. This company was founded by Bill Gates, and they've been developing advanced nuclear reactor designs for over a decade. Their natrium reactor design promises to be more efficient, safer, and capable of integrating with renewable energy sources in ways traditional nuclear plants never could. Do you see what's happening here? Meta is essentially hedging every bet. They're working with the established giant who can deliver traditional nuclear power, the cutting-edge startup that promises revolutionary new technology, and the Bill Gates-backed visionary company that's thinking decades into the future. This isn't a simple energy procurement deal. This is Meta building a nuclear energy empire from the ground up, and they're doing it with partners who have connections to some of the most powerful people in technology and government. But here's where the story takes a darker turn, and this is something that almost no one in the mainstream media has picked up on yet. The locations of these future reactors are not being publicly disclosed. Meta has been incredibly tight-lipped about where exactly these 6.6 gigawatts of nuclear capacity will be built. Industry insiders I've spoken with suggest that Meta is looking at sites in multiple states, primarily in the Midwest and Southeast, where land is cheaper, regulatory environments are friendlier, and proximity to existing nuclear infrastructure makes permitting easier. But there's a problem. Local communities are already pushing back. In several states, leaked documents show that Meta has been in quiet negotiations with state governments, offering tax incentives and economic development promises in exchange for fast-tracked approvals. In one case, in Ohio, a local environmental group obtained emails through a Freedom of Information Act request that showed Meta representatives discussing site assessments for a location within 20 miles of a major population center. The emails were quickly scrubbed from public records, and Meta declined to comment, but the implication is clear. They're willing to build these reactors close to where the power is needed, which means close to their data centers, which means potentially close to where millions of people live. Now, the nuclear industry will tell you that modern reactors are incredibly safe, and statistically, they're right. Nuclear power has one of the best safety records of any major energy source, but public perception is a different story. The specter of Chernobyl, Fukushima, and 3 Mile Island still haunts the collective consciousness, and the idea of a tech company, not a utility or government entity, controlling nuclear reactors is unprecedented and, to many people, unsettling. This brings us to the timeline, and this is where things get even more intense. Meta has stated they want these reactors operational between 2027 and 2030. That's an incredibly aggressive timeline for nuclear construction. Traditional nuclear plants in the United States have taken a decade or more to build in recent years, plagued by cost overruns, regulatory delays, and technical challenges. The Vogtle nuclear plant in Georgia, which just came online in 2023, took 14 years to complete and went billions over budget. So how does Meta plan to do this in potentially just 3 to 6 years? The answer lies in those small modular reactors from Oklo and the advanced designs from TerraPower. These systems are designed to be manufactured in factories and then assembled on site, dramatically reducing construction time. They also have smaller regulatory footprints in theory, though the Nuclear Regulatory Commission still has to approve every design. But here's the insider secret. Meta and their partners have been working with the NRC for much longer than the public announcement would suggest. Sources familiar with the approval process indicate that preliminary design reviews for at least 2 of the reactor types have been underway since early 2024, possibly even late 2023. This means Meta was planning this nuclear future long before they told anyone about it. The investment figures are equally staggering. While Meta hasn't disclosed the exact cost of these agreements, industry analysts estimate that 6.6 gigawatts of nuclear capacity could require an investment of anywhere from $30 to $60 billion over the next decade. That includes the cost of the reactors themselves, the infrastructure to connect them to data centers, ongoing fuel and maintenance costs, and the financial reserves required for decommissioning decades down the line. $60 billion. That's more than the GDP of some countries. It's a bet-the-company level of commitment to a single energy source. And it tells you everything about how confident Meta is that AI is going to be the defining technology of the next 50 years. But they're not alone in this thinking, and this is where the secret war truly begins. Because while Meta was making headlines with their 6.6 gigawatt announcement, Google and Microsoft have been quietly assembling their own nuclear arsenals, and what they're planning is just as ambitious and perhaps even more secretive. Let's start with Google. In October 2024, just 2 months before Meta's announcement, Google revealed they had signed the world's first corporate agreement to purchase power from multiple small modular reactors being developed by Kairos Power. The initial deal was for 500 megawatts, which is significantly smaller than Meta's 6.6 gigawatts, but here's what most people missed. That 500 megawatts is just the first phase. Buried in the announcement was language indicating that Google has options to expand the partnership to multiple gigawatts as the technology proves viable. Kairos Power is developing a novel reactor design that uses molten fluoride salt as a coolant instead of water, which theoretically makes it safer and more efficient. Google's partnership includes helping to fund the development and testing of this technology, which means they're not just buying power, they're investing in becoming a leader in next-generation nuclear energy itself. The first Kairos reactor under the Google deal is expected to come online by 2030, with additional reactors following quickly after if the first proves successful. Google has been characteristically secretive about the locations, but permit applications and land purchases suggest sites in Tennessee and potentially Virginia, close to major Google data center campuses. The estimated investment for Google's nuclear program is believed to be in the $15 to $20 billion range initially, with potential for much more if they expand as expected. But here's where it gets really interesting. Google has also been investing heavily in fusion energy. They're one of the major backers of TAE Technologies, a fusion startup that claims to be on the verge of breakthrough energy production. Fusion, if it works, would be the holy grail of energy, virtually unlimited clean power with minimal radioactive waste. Most experts think commercial fusion is still decades away, but Google is clearly hedging their bets by investing in both fission reactors for the near term and fusion for the long term. This is a company that's thinking not just about the next few years of AI development, but about the next century of technological dominance. And then there's Microsoft, and oh boy, this is where things get absolutely wild. Microsoft has been the quietest of the three tech giants about their nuclear ambitions, but what they're actually doing might be the most audacious of all. In September 2024, Microsoft announced a deal with Constellation Energy to restart and purchase power from the 3 Mile Island nuclear plant in Pennsylvania. Yes, that 3 Mile Island, the site of the most serious nuclear accident in United States history back in 1979. Now, to be clear, they're restarting Unit 1, which was not the reactor that had the partial meltdown. That reactor, Unit 2, has been permanently shut down. But the symbolism is powerful and deliberate. Microsoft is essentially saying that nuclear power is so critical to their future that they're willing to rehabilitate one of the most infamous names in nuclear history. The deal is for the entire output of the plant, about 800 megawatts for 20 years, with an estimated value of over $10 billion. The reactor is expected to come back online in 2028 after extensive refurbishment and safety upgrades. But that's not all Microsoft is doing. Industry sources suggest they're also in negotiations with multiple other nuclear operators for additional capacity, potentially targeting another 2 to 3 gigawatts over the next 5 years. They've also invested in a startup called TerraPower, yes, the same one Meta is partnering with, which shows you how interconnected this whole nuclear renaissance is. Bill Gates personally owns TerraPower and has poured over $1 billion of his own money into developing their natrium reactor design. The first TerraPower reactor is being built in Kemmerer, Wyoming, on the site of a retired coal plant, and it's expected to come online around 2030. Microsoft hasn't officially announced a power purchase agreement with TerraPower yet, but given Gates' connections to both companies, it would be shocking if one isn't in the works. When you add it all up, Microsoft is potentially looking at securing 4 to 5 gigawatts of nuclear power over the next decade, which would put them in the same league as Meta in terms of sheer energy ambition. So let's pause and take stock of what's happening here. Meta is going for 6.6 gigawatts with 3 different partners and multiple reactor types. Google is starting with half a gigawatt, but has plans for potentially several gigawatts using cutting-edge molten salt technology, and is betting on fusion as a long-term play. Microsoft is bringing nuclear history back to life with 3 Mile Island and is connected to some of the most advanced reactor designs in development. Combined, these 3 companies are planning to bring online somewhere between 10 and 15 gigawatts of nuclear power in the next 5 to 10 years, all dedicated primarily to powering AI infrastructure. To put that in perspective, that's roughly equivalent to 10% of the entire current nuclear capacity of the United States, and it's all being built by tech companies for private use. This is unprecedented. This is a fundamental shift in how energy and technology intersect, and it's happening with shocking speed. But why? Why is nuclear power suddenly the answer when these same companies have spent years promoting renewable energy, building massive solar farms, and signing wind power agreements? The answer comes down to 3 factors that insiders talk about but rarely explain publicly. First, density. Nuclear power provides an enormous amount of energy from a very small physical footprint. A single nuclear reactor can produce as much power as hundreds of square miles of solar panels or wind turbines. When you're trying to power data centers that are themselves massive facilities consuming incredible amounts of electricity, you need dense, concentrated power sources nearby. Second, reliability. AI training and inference can't afford downtime. These systems need to run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Solar doesn't work at night, wind doesn't blow consistently, and battery storage at the scale needed is still prohibitively expensive and technologically challenging. Nuclear power provides what's called baseload power, constant, reliable electricity no matter what the weather or time of day. And third, the big one that nobody wants to say out loud, climate commitments are becoming liability issues. All of these companies have made public pledges to reach carbon neutrality or net zero emissions by 2030 or 2040. For years, they've been buying renewable energy credits and carbon offsets to claim they're meeting these goals. But increasingly, investors, regulators, and the public are seeing through these accounting tricks. The European Union is already implementing regulations that will require companies to prove actual emissions reductions, not just offset purchases. If you're running data centers that consume gigawatts of power and you're using electricity from coal or natural gas plants, you're creating enormous carbon emissions. And those are going to become increasingly expensive and legally problematic. Nuclear power, whatever else you want to say about it, produces zero carbon emissions during operation. It's the only currently viable technology that can provide massive baseload power without contributing to climate change. So for Meta, Google, and Microsoft, going nuclear isn't just about having enough power for AI. It's about having clean power that keeps them legally and politically viable in an increasingly climate-conscious world. But this nuclear renaissance isn't happening in a vacuum, and this is where the geopolitical dimension comes into play in ways that are absolutely chilling. Because while American tech companies are racing to build nuclear capacity domestically, there's a global competition happening simultaneously, and it involves China in ways that should make everyone pay attention. China has been the world's most aggressive builder of nuclear power plants for the past decade. They currently have over 50 reactors under construction, more than the rest of the world combined. Chinese companies have developed their own small modular reactor designs and are exporting nuclear technology to countries across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. But here's what's not widely understood. China's nuclear expansion is explicitly tied to their AI ambitions. The Chinese government has made AI dominance a national priority, with stated goals of becoming the world leader in AI by 2030. They understand the energy equation just as well as Meta, Google, and Microsoft do, and they're building the infrastructure to support it at a national level. This creates a fascinating and terrifying dynamic. In the West, private companies are driving the nuclear AI energy build-out, while in China, it's a centralized government effort. The Chinese approach has advantages. They can cut through regulatory red tape, they can force through unpopular projects, and they can coordinate between energy providers and AI developers with a level of efficiency that's impossible in market economies. But the Western approach has advantages too. The innovation and risk-taking of private companies, the diversity of technological approaches, and the involvement of the world's best AI researchers who largely still work in the United States. What we're witnessing is the beginning of an AI arms race, where the ammunition is electrical power and nuclear energy is the weapon of choice. The country or companies that can build the most reliable, highest capacity nuclear infrastructure, the fastest, will have an enormous advantage in developing the next generation of AI systems. And whoever develops those systems first will have economic, military, and social advantages that could last for generations. There are also massive hidden risks that nobody's talking about publicly, but they're keeping executives and government officials up at night. First, there's the regulatory risk. Every one of these reactors needs approval from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, a process that has historically been slow, unpredictable, and prone to delays. The NRC is an independent agency, and while they've been making noises about streamlining approval for new reactor designs, they're also acutely aware that any accident at one of these facilities would be catastrophic for the entire industry. They're not going to rubber stamp approvals just because Meta, Google, or Microsoft want to move fast. If permitting gets delayed by even 2 or 3 years, which is entirely possible, these companies could find themselves in an energy crunch where their AI ambitions outpace their ability to power them. Second, there's supply chain risk. Building nuclear reactors requires highly specialized materials, components, and expertise. Much of the global nuclear supply chain has atrophied over the past few decades as nuclear construction slowed down. There are only a handful of companies worldwide that can manufacture reactor pressure vessels, for example. If Meta, Google, and Microsoft are all trying to build multiple reactors simultaneously, they'll be competing for the same limited pool of suppliers, which could drive costs up dramatically and create delays. There are also concerns about dependence on foreign supply chains, particularly for certain materials that come from geopolitical rivals. Third, and this is the one that keeps me up at night, there's cybersecurity risk. These tech companies are building nuclear reactors that will be connected to their data networks and controlled by software systems. We've already seen devastating cyber attacks on critical infrastructure, from the Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack to attempted intrusions on electrical grids. The idea of a nuclear reactor whose control systems could potentially be accessed through the same corporate networks that handle Facebook data or Gmail is genuinely terrifying. Now, obviously, these companies will implement air gaps and multiple layers of security, but they're also operating in an environment where nation-state hackers are constantly probing for vulnerabilities. A successful cyber attack on a nuclear facility could cause a meltdown or, at minimum, shut down power to critical AI infrastructure at a crucial moment. Fourth, there's public acceptance risk. As these projects move from announcements to actual construction, local opposition is going to intensify. We've already seen this pattern with data centers, where communities initially welcome the economic development, but then push back against the noise, the traffic, the strain on local resources, and the environmental impacts. Nuclear reactors, even small modular ones, carry a whole additional level of public concern. Expect lawsuits, protests, and political campaigns in every location where these facilities are planned. Some projects will get delayed or canceled entirely because of local opposition, which means the companies need to have multiple sites in development simultaneously just to ensure some of them actually get built. And finally, there's the long-term liability risk. Nuclear reactors produce radioactive waste that remains dangerous for thousands of years. The United States still doesn't have a permanent repository for high-level nuclear waste. The Yucca Mountain project was canceled, and spent fuel is currently stored on site at reactor facilities in temporary cooling pools and dry casks. If Meta, Google, and Microsoft are operating dozens of reactors, they'll be producing tons of nuclear waste every year. Despite all these risks, the companies are charging ahead, and the reason is simple. They've done the math and decided that the risks of not securing nuclear power are greater than the risks of pursuing it. If AI develops as rapidly as they believe it will, the company that can't power their systems will fall behind irreversibly. Market dominance in AI could be worth trillions of dollars over the next few decades. Against that prize, spending tens of billions on nuclear infrastructure and taking on significant risks starts to look like not just a good bet, but the only rational choice. This is why I call it a secret war. On the surface, these companies are still cooperating in various ways, sharing research, participating in industry groups, and sometimes even partnering on specific projects. But underneath, there's a brutal competition for resources, talent, and strategic advantage. The nuclear deals are just the most visible manifestation of a deeper battle for the future. The implications for the rest of us are profound and largely unexamined in public discourse. If these three companies succeed in securing 10 to 15 gigawatts of dedicated nuclear power, they'll have an energy advantage over every other company in the world. Startups won't be able to compete in developing large-scale AI because they won't have access to the power needed to train and run those models. Other countries won't be able to compete unless they make similar massive investments in nuclear infrastructure. We could see the emergence of what you might call energy monopolies in AI, where the companies that control the power also control the technology, and by extension, control enormous aspects of the economy and society. Think about what AI is already being used for. Content moderation, search results for recommendation algorithms, hiring decisions, medical diagnoses, financial trading, military applications. Now imagine those systems becoming 10 or 100 times more powerful and capable, and imagine them being controlled exclusively by 3 American companies that have secured the energy infrastructure to run them while everyone else is struggling with power constraints. That's not a hypothetical future. That's the future these nuclear deals are designed to create. It's a concentration of power that would have been unimaginable even 10 years ago. There's also the question of what happens to the broader electrical grid. If Meta, Google, and Microsoft are pulling 10 to 15 gigawatts off the grid for their private use, that's power that's not available for homes, hospitals, schools, and other businesses. Now, they'll argue that they're adding new capacity through these nuclear builds, so they're not taking power away from anyone. But the reality is more complicated. The transmission infrastructure, the grid itself, has to be upgraded to handle these massive new loads. Substations need to be built, high voltage lines need to be installed, and all of that requires permits, land, and investment. Who pays for that? In many cases, it's ratepayers, meaning regular people see their electricity bills go up to support the grid infrastructure that primarily benefits tech giants. This is already happening in some states, and it's causing political backlash that's only going to intensify. We also need to talk about what this means for energy equity globally. The amount of money and resources being devoted to powering AI for these 3 companies is staggering. Meanwhile, there are still hundreds of millions of people around the world without reliable access to electricity. The nuclear technology being developed for these projects could theoretically be used to bring power to underserved regions, but there's no indication that's a priority for any of the companies involved. In fact, the small modular reactors that are supposed to be cheaper and easier to deploy are being monopolized by wealthy tech companies for private use rather than being used to solve global energy poverty. This is creating a bifurcated world where some of the most advanced energy technology ever developed is being used to train algorithms while people in developing countries still lack basic electricity. The moral implications of this are profound, but they're getting lost in the excitement about AI and the technical achievements of nuclear power. Now, let's talk about what comes next, because this story is far from over. The 6.6 gigawatts that Meta announced is almost certainly not their final number. Inside the company, there are discussions about what they're calling Phase 2, which could involve an additional 5 to 10 gigawatts by the mid-2030s. This hasn't been announced publicly, but people familiar with Meta's long-term infrastructure planning say the company is thinking about energy needs for the 2040 and 2050 timeframes, when they expect AI systems to be integrated into every aspect of their business and potentially into society through Meta's platforms. If those projections hold, Meta alone could end up operating the equivalent of 15 to 20 large nuclear reactors, making them one of the largest nuclear power operators in the world, civilian or otherwise. Google is similarly thinking beyond their initial announcements. The fusion investments they're making are specifically targeted at having commercial fusion power available by the 2040s. If fusion works, it would make their current fission reactor investments look quaint. We're talking about potentially unlimited clean energy, which would give whoever controls it an absolutely insurmountable advantage in AI and computing. Google is also exploring geothermal energy as a complement to nuclear, drilling deep wells to tap into Earth's heat, and they're investing in advanced battery storage technologies that could help buffer renewable energy. They're essentially trying to create a diversified energy portfolio that makes them resilient to any single technology failing or being delayed. Microsoft's plans are equally ambitious. Beyond the 3 Mile Island restart and potential TerraPower agreements, they're looking at direct air capture and carbon sequestration technologies. The idea is that even if they have to use some fossil fuels for parts of their operations, they can literally pull carbon out of the atmosphere to offset it. They're investing in companies developing these technologies and planning to integrate them with their data centers. Microsoft is also exploring the possibility of underwater data centers powered by offshore nuclear platforms, which sounds like science fiction but is actually being seriously studied. The advantage would be that cooling systems are more efficient when you're surrounded by ocean water, and you can place the facilities closer to undersea fiber optic cables for faster connectivity. The next 5 years are going to be absolutely critical. By 2030, we should start seeing the first of these new reactors coming online. The Oklo reactors for Meta, the Kairos reactors for Google, and Microsoft's 3 Mile Island restart could all be operational. If those projects succeed and demonstrate that the new generation of nuclear technology works safely and economically, expect an absolute flood of additional investment and construction. We could see dozens of reactors announced and built throughout the 2030s. But if any of them fail, if there's a significant accident, or if the technology proves more expensive or difficult than expected, the entire nuclear renaissance could stall. The stakes are incredibly high, and the margin for error is essentially zero. There are also wildcards that could change everything. If a breakthrough happens in fusion energy earlier than expected, it could make all these fission reactor investments obsolete. If quantum computing advances allow for much more efficient AI algorithms that don't require as much computational power, the energy equation could change dramatically. If government regulations change, either becoming more restrictive or more permissive, it could accelerate or slow down these projects. And if public sentiment turns decisively against nuclear power, due to an accident anywhere in the world, even one unrelated to these projects, it could create political pressure that kills them regardless of their technical merits. What's absolutely certain is that the secret war for power between Meta, Google, and Microsoft is going to define the tech industry and potentially the world for the next several decades. The company that solves the energy equation and can power the most advanced AI systems will have advantages that cascade into every other domain. They'll attract the best talent because they can offer the best tools. They'll win the most contracts because they can deliver the most capable systems. They'll generate the most revenue, which they can reinvest into even more energy and computing infrastructure, creating a virtuous cycle that leaves competitors further and further behind. This is winner-take-all dynamics playing out at a scale we've never seen before. And here's the thing that should really make you think. All of this is happening with remarkably little public debate or democratic input. These are private companies making decisions about energy infrastructure that will affect millions of people and that carry risks that could last for millennia. There's no public vote on whether Meta should build nuclear reactors. There's no referendum on whether Google should invest in fusion. The decisions are being made in boardrooms by executives whose primary obligation is to shareholders, not to the public interest. Now, you can argue that's how capitalism is supposed to work, that private enterprise drives innovation, and that these companies are taking risks that governments never would. But you can also argue that some decisions are too important, too consequential, to be left entirely to private actors motivated by profit. The truth is probably somewhere in between, but we're not even having that conversation publicly because most people don't know this is happening. So what can you do with this information? First, understand that the world is changing in fundamental ways right now. The convergence of AI and nuclear power is going to reshape industries, job markets, and geopolitics in ways we're just beginning to grasp. If you work in tech, if you invest in markets, if you vote in elections, if you're raising children who will live in this future, you need to be paying attention to these developments. Second, demand transparency and accountability from these companies and from your government representatives. Ask questions about safety, about environmental impact, about who benefits and who bears the risks of these massive infrastructure projects. Third, educate yourself about nuclear energy, about AI, about the intersection of technology and power in both senses of that word. The decisions being made now will echo for generations, and an informed public is the only check on corporate and governmental power. And look, I know this has been intense. We've covered an enormous amount of ground, from Meta's 6.6 gigawatt nuclear deal to the secret strategies of Google and Microsoft, from the technical details of small modular reactors to the geopolitical implications of an AI energy arms race. But here's why this matters, and why I needed to make this video. The future is being built right now, today, in decisions about power plants and AI chips and data centers. Most people won't know about it until it's already done, until the infrastructure is built and the power dynamics are set. But you, right now, watching this, you have the information, you know what's happening, you can see the shape of what's coming. And that knowledge is power in itself. This is just the beginning of this story. Over the coming months and years, we're going to see more announcements, more deals, more revelations about the scale of what these companies are planning. There will be controversies, probably some scandals, hopefully no disasters, but possibly those too. I'll be covering all of it on this channel, breaking down the latest developments, explaining what they mean, and connecting the dots that others miss. But I need you with me. I need you to hit that subscribe button right now if you haven't already, because this is the kind of content that gets buried by algorithms, that doesn't trend on social media, that the powerful would rather you not pay attention to. Your subscription, your comment, sharing what you learned from this video, that's what keeps this information flowing. That's what builds a community of people who actually understand what's happening in the world instead of just consuming whatever narrative is being fed to them. Drop a comment below and tell me what you think. Are you excited about this nuclear renaissance and what it could mean for technology? Are you terrified about the concentration of power in the hands of a few companies? Do you think there's an alternative path that we should be considering? I read every single comment, and the best discussions happen down there, not just with me, but between all of you. This community is smart, informed, and engaged, and that's what makes these videos worth making. Share this video with anyone who needs to understand what's really happening in tech right now. Your friends who work in the industry, your family members who invest in these companies, anyone who cares about the future should see this. The secret war for power is real. It's happening now, and you just got the inside story that most people will never hear. Meta's 6.6 gigawatts is just the opening salvo. Google and Microsoft are armed and ready. China is mobilizing on a national scale, and the prize is nothing less than control over the most transformative technology in human history. Stay informed, stay critical, and I'll see you in the next one.